They said it was an exaggeration, that Trump was just trying to grab attention. But what if he knows something we don't? Why 2025? Why the almost prophetic tone in his warning? Daniel, thousands of years ago, described wars, alliances, and betrayals that seem to be repeating themselves right now. While the world gets distracted, clear signs are unfolding right before our eyes. If this is true, ignoring it could be very costly. But there's still time to prepare. Before we dive into this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because here you'll understand the prophecies and learn how to get ready for what's to come, so nothing catches you off guard. When Donald Trump took the stage and uttered those words, it felt like the air became heavier. This wasn't just any political speech. It was like thunder slicing through a clear sky. He spoke about a potential global war in 2025 with a conviction that made many people tremble, even those who aren't fans of his. The motivation behind each statement seemed to come from something deeper, almost like a psalm warning of dark days ahead. Many laughed, others ignored it, but some felt deep down that there was something there that couldn't be dismissed. And when God puts something in someone's heart, no matter who they are, it's wise to pay attention. Interestingly, alarmist speeches are usually met with quick criticism and dismissed. But this time, even analysts who don't favor Trump paused to think. Why 2025? They wondered. Was it just a coincidence, or did he have insider information? There are moments when inspiration comes from sources we don't always understand. And even in the gospel, we see God using unlikely people to convey urgent messages. When Christ warned his disciples about tough times ahead, he did so not to instill fear, but to prepare their spirits. Perhaps that's the key to understanding the tone from that day. Trump isn't exactly known for softening his words. Still, there was a spiritual weight to his speech, as if every sentence was an inverted prayer, not asking for blessings, but urging humanity to awaken. Imagine hearing that in a few years, the world could be engulfed in flames. How would you react? Many thought of their families, their children, the uncertain future. Biblical wisdom teaches us to discern the signs of the times, and this type of speech could be one of those signs. Isn't it ironic that when we need inspiration the most, it comes in the form of a warning? Some also notice strange parallels between his words and ancient biblical accounts. They recalled passages from the book of Daniel, where prophets received visions about kingdoms and wars to come. I'm not saying Trump is a prophet, but it's curious how the context and the choice of year seem to echo something greater. If we think about it, even the great leaders in history, believers or not, have often been instruments to fulfill something that was already written. And does God still speak in this way, even using political speeches to wake us up? The answer may not be so simple. What's most intriguing is that his speech didn't stay confined to one audience or event. Quickly, videos and snippets circulated on social media, sparking heated debates. Some quoted the gospel to say that prophecy clearly speaks of wars and rumors of wars. Others used data and graphs to prove that international tensions are indeed escalating. This blend of the spiritual and the geopolitical creates a scenario where it's hard to separate where faith ends and political analysis begins. But in real life, those boundaries are rarely so clear. And here comes the question that few dare to face. What if he's right? What if 2025 isn't just another year, but a milestone marking something that will change the course of history? If true, then we're facing a call to prepare, not just physically, but spiritually. A preparation that demands constant prayer, seeking wisdom, diving into the scriptures, and above all, reconciling with God. After all, as Christ said, watch and pray. And perhaps without realizing it, this is just the beginning of a much greater story that will lead us to an ancient and astonishing book. If this is already stirring something in you, write in the comments what you think about this connection between Trump's warning and Daniel's prophecies. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. The book of Daniel isn't just a historical record, it's a true prophetic map that spans millennia. Written by a man who lived in a foreign land, away from his people, it carries a spiritual force that inspires and intrigues to this day. When he describes kingdoms rising and falling, broken alliances, and devastating wars, he isn't just narrating past events. He's revealing patterns that repeat themselves, and it's impossible not to feel compelled to look beyond the headlines and see what God has already shown. After all, the wisdom contained in the scriptures is like a psalm that echoes into our days. Many scholars agree that Daniel had visions that have been impressively fulfilled. The fall of Babylon, the rise of Persia, the arrival of Alexander, the dominance of Rome, all of this was foretold. Isn't it curious how the gospel also warns us about signs before major events? It's as if there's an invisible thread connecting the past, present, and future. When Christ cited Daniel, he made it clear that his words weren't just for the ancients, but for all who wish to understand the times. This leads us to wonder, could what we see in the news today be just the beginning of something much larger? Some say that these prophecies are merely metaphors, but just look at the current situation to realize that it's not that simple. Armed conflicts, treacherous alliances, and power struggles are repeating as if following an ancient script. Daniel spoke of kings who rise with pride and fall suddenly. If we apply this to our time, it's not hard to find examples. Just look at global leaders who today seem untouchable, but tomorrow could be merely names in history books. This not only provokes reflection, but also prayer for discernment. It's impressive how Daniel intertwines spiritual and geopolitical elements without creating a rigid separation between them. He understood that nations don't move solely by economic interests, but also under an invisible mechanism fulfilling a divine purpose. Those who read closely see that there's a profound meaning in every detail and that God himself controls history. This realization changes how we view the present. Instead of fear, it inspires us to draw closer to the Creator and seek in Him the strength to face whatever comes. If anyone wants to start understanding how these prophecies connect with the modern world, a good exercise is to read Daniel chapter 2 and chapter 7 side by side. These passages speak of statues made of metals and symbolic beasts representing kingdoms and powers. It may seem distant, but when compared to today's power blocks, the similarities are striking. This reminds us that biblical wisdom isn't abstract, it's extremely practical. And, as an experienced mentor would say, understanding the past is one of the best ways to prepare for the future. The fact is, when Trump speaks of 2025 and we read Daniel, the lines begin to cross in a strange way. You don't have to be a theologian to feel that there's a connection. And this link between modern politics and ancient prophecy leads us to an inevitable question. If Daniel saw so much, what else did he reveal that's yet to unfold? Perhaps the answer lies in a darker vision he described, involving a powerful and destructive beast, which many believe is already taking shape before our eyes. Daniel described a fourth beast, unlike any of the previous ones, so terrifying that it didn't even have a specific name, just the image of something brutal, crushing everything in its path. For those who read with spiritual eyes, this figure carries more than just metaphors. It's a warning. The prophet speaks of iron teeth, crushing claws, and a power capable of dominating the world. When relating this to the current scenario, it's impossible not to think of the military and technological alliances forming silently. The motivation behind these forces may seem political, but something much deeper is happening behind the scenes. Some scholars say that this beast represents a global union of powers, something humanity has never seen before. Looking at history, every empire had its rise and fall, but what Daniel describes seems to go beyond a single country or ruler. Imagine a system so powerful that it can control economies, armies, and even thoughts through technology and propaganda. The gospel reminds us that where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, prompting us to reflect, where is the heart of nations heading today? To God or to power? What's particularly intriguing is that Daniel doesn't just describe strength, he also depicts cruelty. This beast doesn't just win, it completely destroys without mercy. Today, we see advancements in autonomous weapons, artificial intelligence, and surveillance systems that make a global dominance never before imagined possible. This isn't science fiction, it's a developing reality. And when we remember that the prophet wrote this over 2,000 years ago, the wisdom contained in those words becomes even more impactful. It's as if God is saying to us, prepare yourselves, because this is going to happen. Many people ignore this type of prophecy because it seems distant, but the truth is that signs are already before us. Increasing military tensions, fiery speeches among powers, and the creation of strategic blocs with global reach are clear indicators. For the Christians seeking inspiration in the Word, these events should not provoke panic, but rather prayer and vigilance. Just as a psalm strengthens the soul, understanding what's coming strengthens the spirit. The motivation here is simple. Be ready, whether to face political crises or to stand firm spiritually. A practical example? Just as a farmer prepares his land before the storm, we need to prepare our lives. This includes seeking more biblical knowledge, strengthening our communion with Christ, staying alert to the news with spiritual discernment, and teaching our children to depend on God. It's not about living in fear, but about living wisely. After all, a prepared army is not caught off guard, and the people who know their God will be strong and do great things, as Daniel 11:32 says. This is the difference between being swept along by history and being part of those who stand firm. And if Daniel was correct about so many past events, why doubt this vision? The fourth beast could already be moving, even if discreetly, in the news and in the secret meetings of great powers. Perhaps it hasn't yet shown all its strength, but its footsteps are already echoing. And this realization leads us to another crucial point. Why do so many scholars believe that the year 2025 could be the moment when this force reveals itself fully? Quick pause. If this part is opening your eyes, comment, "I am vigilant," to confirm that you're paying attention to the signs. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment to do so now. The key year, 2025, in the prophetic timeline. When biblical and geopolitical analysts point to 2025, it's not just a number tossed into the wind. There's an entire line of reasoning based on historical events and prophecies that converges at this point in time. Israel, for example, has always been a prophetic marker, and political and military changes that tend to reverberate across the global landscape. The wisdom of the scriptures teaches us that there is a time for every purpose under heaven, Ecclesiastes 3:1, and perhaps 2025 is one of those appointed times. This understanding brings not only curiosity, but also motivation to seek more from God and discern the signs. Some researchers use detailed calculations, comparing dates of wars, treaties, and territorial restorations to arrive at this year. Interestingly, when looking at the gospel, we see that Christ also pointed to specific moments, urging his disciples to stay alert. Daniel did the same. He indicated periods, numbers, and milestones that at first glance seem enigmatic, but gain clarity when compared to history. And if all these points truly align now, we are living in decisive days where prayer becomes not only necessary, but urgent. There's also a psychological and spiritual aspect to all this. When a specific year is brought up, people tend to divide, some mock, others prepare. However, those who know the word realize that spiritual unpreparedness is a much greater risk than any physical threat. This is where the inspiration from men and women of faith comes in, who, in the face of warnings, made transformative decisions. Like Noah, who began building the ark before the rain, not out of fear, but out of obedience. This is the type of wisdom we need to cultivate today. Many wonder, if 2025 is so important, why don't we hear more about it? The answer may lie precisely in the fact that the greatest changes often happen behind the scenes. And those who read Daniel know that God operates both in the visible and the invisible. Great empires have risen and fallen, while ordinary people lived as if nothing was happening. This is the danger of ignoring the signs. It's like a psalm warning us not to sleep spiritually, for the coming of certain things will be like a thief in the night. For those wanting to prepare, there are practical steps. Study the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. Keep an eye on the situation in Israel and its alliances. Develop emotional resilience and strengthen faith through daily prayer. This doesn't mean living anxiously, but living attentively. The motivation is clear. When we know God's plans, we aren't deceived by appearances. And this spiritual preparation acts as a shield that allows us to face even the worst storms. And so, when we consider all this, the inevitable question arises: if 2025 is indeed a prophetic milestone, what exactly is being prepared to happen during that period? The clues may lie in the silent actions of world powers, which, as Daniel described, operate in the shadows while the people believe that peace reigns. The silence of powers and movements in the shadows. While peace talks echo at international conferences, behind the curtains the game is different. Secret treaties, closed-door meetings, and strategic military movements occur away from the public eye. This duplicity is nothing new. Daniel spoke of kings who, with smooth words, gained trust while plotting war. For those seeking wisdom in the scriptures, this serves as a warning not to trust solely what is visible. The motivation here is clear. Keep your eyes open and your spirit in constant prayer. Historically, there has always been an interval between the promise of peace and the onset of conflicts. It's like the tense silence before a storm when everything seems calm, but the pressure is building. The gospel reminds us that when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction will come upon them. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. And this warning is not just poetic, it's profoundly practical. How many times has humanity been caught off guard because it chose to believe in appearances? What's happening today fits perfectly into this pattern. A clear example comes from the military field. While public opinion gets distracted by everyday matters, countries are reinforcing arsenals, investing in military artificial intelligence, and establishing defense alliances. These movements are rarely announced on national networks. Daniel describes exactly this type of strategy. Leaders, strengthening themselves in secrecy to, at the right moment, act with full force. This should inspire us not only to reflect, but also to act. And for the Christian, action begins with discernment and prayer. The silence of powers is often more threatening than the noise of explicit threats. When everyone is talking, it's easy to identify who is against whom, but when no one says anything, the enemy may be much closer than we think. This is a time to seek inspiration in Psalm 91, which reminds us to remain under the wings of the Most High, for only He can provide true security. The world may promise stability, but only God fulfills. Another important point is to understand that these maneuvers in the shadows don't only involve armies and weapons. There are economic and technological wars happening right now, shaping the future of nations. Control of energy, market manipulation, and digital influence are weapons as lethal as missiles. And those who fail to recognize this risk being struck without even understanding where the blow came from. That's why spiritual wisdom must walk hand in hand with geopolitical understanding. If all this sounds intense, it's because it truly is. And, as Daniel warned us, when these kings finish their preparations, the scene shifts rapidly. Perhaps we are closer to that point than we think. And what could accelerate this moment? Perhaps something that is already happening before our eyes in the area that is growing the fastest in the world, science and technology, the prophecies of Daniel and the multiplication of science. Daniel 12 speaks of a time when knowledge will increase before decisive events in human history. Looking at the present, it doesn't take much effort to realize that we are living precisely in that scenario. Technology is advancing at a pace that even the most optimistic find alarming. Artificial intelligence, robotics, autonomous weapons, and global surveillance systems are no longer fiction. The motivation behind these advancements may seem like innovation and progress, but spiritually, there's a silent warning echoing. Biblical wisdom teaches us that not every human advancement is necessarily for good. The growth of science, according to Daniel, wouldn't come with just benefits. On the contrary, it would also be an element preparing the ground for great catastrophes. Think of weapons of mass destruction now controlled by algorithms, information networks capable of manipulating millions in seconds, digital military alliances operating in cyberspace. The gospel teaches us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And this wisdom requires us to understand the risks behind technological brilliance. In real life, we already have examples of how technology can turn against its creators. Countries invest billions to achieve digital superiority, while simultaneously becoming vulnerable to invisible attacks that can collapse entire economies. Daniel described times of great anguish, and it's not hard to imagine how a global technological failure could serve as a trigger for an unprecedented conflict. The inspiration for the Christian in this scenario is not to place their trust solely in human solutions, but to anchor their hope in God. Moreover, the multiplication of science creates a false sense of control. Many believe that with enough knowledge, it's possible to avert any tragedy. But the Bible reminds us in various Psalms that true security doesn't lie in the strength of the horse or the power of the warrior, but in the protection of the Lord. And it's precisely when man believes he is invincible that he becomes more vulnerable. History has proven this time and again. If we want to apply this practically, we need to learn to use technology without being used by it. This means filtering information, protecting data, teaching the next generations to discern truth from manipulation, and above all, using digital resources to spread the message of Christ and the inspiration of the Word. Technology can be a powerful tool for collective prayer, evangelism, and spiritual edification if used wisely. But as Daniel showed, this accelerated advancement is just one piece of the puzzle. And if the other pieces are already being positioned, fragile alliances, political tensions, and prophetic signs, the question remains, how long can the divided kingdom hold before it crumbles? The divided kingdom, an alliance on the brink of rupture. Daniel describes a divided kingdom, part strong, part weak, unable to remain united for long. This image, symbolized by iron mixed with clay, is one of the most striking metaphors in his visions. Today, just look at some of the largest military and economic alliances to realize that despite the rhetoric of unity, cracks are already appearing. The motivation that keeps these powers together is almost always strategic but rarely genuine. And according to the wisdom of the scriptures, everything not grounded in God will crumble sooner or later. Iron and clay don't mix, no matter how hard they try. It's a powerful metaphor for blocks of nations that unite for interest, but whose cultures, ideologies, and goals clash. The gospel shows us that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Mark 3:25. And this truth applies to empires and global alliances as well. Ironically, while they preach stability, leaders are already preparing for a potential collapse of these unions. It's as if everyone knows that rupture is inevitable. Historically, divided kingdoms have always been easy prey for external adversaries. Rome, for instance, didn't fall solely due to enemy strength, but also due to internal corruption and instability. Today, we see alliances being tested by economic crises, regional conflicts, and internal power struggles. This creates a perfect scenario for the iron and clay to break apart completely. For the attentive Christian, this is yet another opportunity to seek inspiration through prayer and to stand firm in what is unshakable, the kingdom of God. This fragility also manifests in technological and economic dependency. When one part of the bloc is vulnerable, the whole system suffers. It's like a sick body. Even if it has strong muscles, a single failing organ can cause the entire system to collapse. Daniel reminds us that this unstable mixture will not endure forever, and when it crumbles, it will make way for something new, and not always good. This is where the wisdom of preparing comes in before the crisis knocks on our door. Practically understanding this pattern helps us interpret the news more deeply. Instead of just seeing peace agreements and trade treaties, we should ask, what keeps this alliance standing? Is it trust or interest? Is it a common purpose or just fear of the enemy? Questions like these help discern whether we are witnessing a lasting union or a house of cards about to fall. And as a psalm teaches, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, implying that alliances without him are already frail at birth. And if these alliances truly break apart, global chaos will be inevitable. Trade wars could escalate into armed conflicts, and internal disputes could open gaps for external threats. It's exactly in this context that global focus turns to a specific point on the map, Israel, which both Daniel and current events place at the center of history. Trump, Israel, and the center of prophecy. Israel has always been more than just a point on the map. It is the epicenter of the greatest biblical prophecies. When Trump places Jerusalem and the state of Israel at the center of his speeches, he touches on a wound and at the same time a millennial promise. Daniel had already placed this region at the heart of the final events, describing wars, treaties, and betrayals that would pass through there. The motivation to pay attention to this is simple. What happens in Israel rarely stays within its borders. God chose that land as the stage for his story, and that's why the whole world watches it. When Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, he reignited prophetic discussions that seemed dormant. Many saw this as a political act, but those who understand the gospel recognize that there was also a spiritual significance. In the Bible, Jerusalem is not just a city, it's a symbol of God's presence and promise, and every time global decisions involve that city, it's as if the prophetic clock takes another tick. This inspires us to follow not just the headlines, but also the scriptures, to perceive connections that many ignore. Daniel describes leaders forging alliances and breaking them rapidly, especially around Jerusalem. Today, we see peace treaties being signed and undone within months, military alliances forming and collapsing, and religious disputes igniting the entire scene. History shows that it only takes a spark in Israel for tensions to spread across the globe. And Psalm 122 reminds us, "Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, they shall prosper that love thee." This isn't just poetry, it's spiritual strategy. What intrigues is how geopolitics and prophecy seem to walk hand in hand when it comes to Israel. On one side, we have economic, military, and strategic interests. On the other, divine promises and ancient prophecies. And when these two dimensions meet, the impact is global. It's not an exaggeration to say that decisions made in Jerusalem can directly influence peace or war in other parts of the world. The wisdom here is to realize that spirituality and politics are more connected than we think. For those wanting to prepare, the first step is to know what the Bible says about Israel, especially in the book of Daniel and the Gospels. The second is to keep an eye on what world leaders say and do regarding Jerusalem. This isn't mere curiosity, it's spiritual vigilance. Christ taught us to discern the signs of the times, and many of these signs pass through the Holy Land. The motivation here isn't fear, but clarity, to understand in order to act with faith and wisdom. And if the recent events involving Trump and Israel have already stirred the global scene, what can we say about what's yet to come? Perhaps we are entering that period described as the calm before the storm, a time when everything seems quiet, but forces are moving towards something unprecedented. Hey, quickly, what I'm about to show you next is even more impactful, so make sure to like, comment, I believe, and share this video so that more people can prepare. The war cry and the silence before the storm. Some call it prophetic silence, that period when seemingly nothing happens but everything is being prepared. It's as if the world is holding its breath before a decisive event. Daniel describes this time as the beginning of a time of trouble such as never was, a dark milestone in human history. The motivation to recognize this moment is clear. Those who ignore the silence may be caught off guard by the thunder that follows. It's precisely in this interval that the greatest strategic movements occur. If we look around, we'll see subtle signs. Troops being deployed without announcement, sudden changes in trade treaties, political speeches taking on increasingly aggressive tones. The Gospel speaks of wars and rumors of wars, Matthew 24:6, and the rumor is already in the air. It doesn't shout, it whispers, spreading through the lines of the news. The wisdom lies in not underestimating these whispers, for it's how the storm begins, slowly, until suddenly it erupts with full force. One clear example is the military escalation in certain regions, happening without much media coverage. By the time the public realizes, it's too late to prevent confrontation. This is the pattern Daniel seems to have predicted, a silent preparation for an inevitable clash. Psalm 46 reminds us that even in the midst of wars, God is our refuge and strength. This doesn't mean ignoring the risks. It means facing them with the confidence that He is still in control. The silence before the storm also works in the hearts of people. It's easy to become complacent when there are no visible signs of danger. But true spiritual preparation happens on calm days, not chaotic ones. It's in these moments that we should intensify our prayers, strengthen our faith, and constantly seek inspiration from the Word. When Christ turns His attention to move history, those who are steadfast will not be shaken. This silent period is deceptive because, while it seems calm, it's filled with tension. It's like a rope stretched to its limit, ready to snap. And throughout history, whenever the rope breaks, the consequences are swift and devastating. Daniel warns us to watch and pray, not only in the face of war, but also before it. This vigilance is what separates the unprepared from those who remain steadfast. And if we are indeed in this prophetic silence, then what comes next is not just another chapter in history, but possibly the fulfillment of a secret revealed centuries ago. A secret that connects prophecy, geopolitics, and Trump's very warning about 2025. The secret of Daniel that explains Trump's warning. In chapters 11 and 12 of Daniel, we find a detailed narrative about a bold ruler, global wars, and a set time for a final conflict. This is not merely prophetic poetry. These descriptions are so precise, they read like a preemptive report on history. When aligning the dates and events Daniel presents with the modern timeline, many scholars are surprised to find that the convergence points dangerously toward the period mentioned by Trump, 2025. The motivation for investigating this isn't to instill fear, but to seek God's wisdom in understanding the times. Daniel speaks of a leader rising with great power, capable of provoking alliances and breaking them on a global scale. He acts with cunning, manipulating scenarios until he achieves his goals. This resonates strongly with the current geopolitical landscape, where leaders and powers move like pieces on a global chessboard. The gospel shows us that the battle is not just against flesh and blood, but against spiritual forces. That's why discerning the spirit of the age is as important as understanding the politics that govern it. The set time mentioned by Daniel is not random. It connects historical milestones such as events involving Israel, changes in empires, and celestial signs. By placing all these points on the timeline, we see that the prophecy refers not to a generic period, but to a specific moment in history. It's as if God marked a day in his agenda when the world would see the fulfillment of these words. For those with faith, this isn't a cause for panic, but for spiritual preparation. The connection to Trump's warning becomes even more intriguing when we realize that his tone wasn't just political. He spoke as someone wanting to shake the audience, reminiscent of the Old Testament prophets who were often misunderstood at the time they spoke. Just as Jeremiah was labeled an alarmist, Trump received the same label. But biblical history teaches us that in many cases, what seemed like exaggeration was, in fact, a divine warning. To prepare for a scenario like the one Daniel describes, it's not enough to stockpile provisions or make earthly plans. It's essential to strengthen faith, know the scriptures, develop discernment, and maintain a life of constant prayer. This doesn't mean living in fear, but living with purpose. As Psalm 27 says, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" This is the confidence we need to have in light of what's to come. If this interpretation is correct, then we are not merely facing another political cycle, but a prophetic clock about to strike. And when that clock tolls, there will be no time left for improvisation. The question is, will we be ready for what's coming, or will we be caught in the storm without spiritual shelter? And now, after everything you've heard, will you continue living as if nothing is happening? The prophecies of Daniel and the warnings echoing in the political landscape are not distant stories. They are unfolding right before our eyes. What will you do with this knowledge? Will you prepare spiritually, strengthen your faith, and seek direction from God? Or will you wait to think about it until it's too late? If the word is true, and it is, then every news item, every speech, and every movement in the shadows could be signs of what's to come. So I want to provoke you. What if 2025 really is a milestone in history? Will you be ready? Don't miss out on this conversation. Leave your comment, share your opinion, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Because if you want to keep understanding the prophetic signs and learning how to prepare for what's coming, you need to be here, following every new piece of content.